Sometimes we might look for ways to enhance our role-playing experience. And for that, I'm going to be talking about modifying classes, tweaking them in a way that enhances role-playing without changing the actual abilities of the class. The idea for this came from my own campaign. We converted from basic fantasy to Dungeons and Dragons, and in the process of converting the characters, we found that a couple of characters where we had a little bit of a struggle finding out exactly what they were. Not because of their original class, but more because of how the players play the character. This particular case I'm talking about is this fighter that we had in basic fantasy. The way that the character was played in our game, it was a very angry fighter. The player, she would play this guy like going crazy in every fight, goes all out, and is just basically kind of insane. When we converted to Dungeons and Dragons and we were thinking about what character class to pick, the obvious choice would have been fighter because the character was a fighter in basic fantasy. But we realized that not really. What we went for is for barbarian. And mind you, this is a character that is a city guy. He's totally urban, but his behavior and the way the character was played in our game was 100% raging barbarian. So we went for that, and that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. In this case, we took the class barbarian, which usually means some dude that comes from the tribe in the forests or from the Arctic regions or the mountains and whatever, and it doesn't know about civilization, and they're savages and they do savage things and all that kind of stuff. We turned that upside down by saying, no, this is basically a city guy with anger management issues. Then I kept thinking about it, like what other things could be done to character classes. And one of the ideas that came to mind is, let's say you have a wizard, and we know the typical wizard where you have your spell book and your spell components and all that. But what if instead of a wizard was an inventor? Then you take all the spells and tweak them so they are actually machine operated. I know this might not fit in some campaigns, but it's an idea. For example, instead of a sleep spell, this character actually has some sort of gas tank in a backpack, and then just spray the gas and make other monsters fall asleep. Or for example, something like Hold Person. Well, instead of just a spell, what if it's some sort of almost unbreakable net that wraps around the enemy? Instead of just wrapping up like a spider cocoon, it actually keeps the shape or the position that person or character or monster was in at that point in time. Of course, this would require discussion between player and dungeon master to find a happy medium, something that doesn't break the game, but it's actually fun to play and provides a lot of material not only for role-playing but also for backstory and for future adventures. Another idea that comes to mind is monks. And we're going to flip this upside down in this case, where the monk, maybe instead of being the typical guy or gal that comes from a monastery and is all zen and, has learned to use his hands as weapons, what if this character is actually a wizard or a sorcerer? All these things come from within. And then you would present this character like this wizard that seems defenseless and kind of like wearing his robes and his hat and has a staff, but when he shows what he can do with his magic, basically you turn key points into actual magic. And then you have this monk has to read, as a role-playing thing, read his spell book to channel that energy into his fist. Because if you think about it, monk can hit stuff that you wouldn't usually be able to hit with your bare hands. And that could get even cooler if you choose, as a monk tradition, the way of the four elements. I don't know, all these things I've mentioned, there are things that probably you could solve by multi-classing, but this allows you to have the full class benefits because you really want to play a wizard or a monk or a barbarian, but you make it in a different way. You make it in a fresh way, innovative way that makes the role-playing experience better for you and your friends. Of course, make sure that none of these changes will break the game mechanics. You gotta make these tweaks as invisible in terms of game mechanics as possible. So I hope this gives you new ideas for your game as a way to get more role-playing out of characters. And I'm curious to know, have you ever done this to any of your character classes? Let me know in the comments. I would really like to hear different ideas and approaches for this kind of thing. As always, if you like the content of the video, please hit the like button. If you like the channel, feel free to subscribe. I really appreciate it. And until next time, keep those D20s rolling.